Welcome to Deeply Rooted Online, where women encourage women by sharing scripture and stories of God at work.
Welcome to our viewers and listeners. Once again, we are privileged to be here with Dr. Laura Lewis. And last week, she shared a little bit about her life journey from a skeptic, scientist, to a believer, a Christ follower, and how that led her to embark on a journey to help those who are hurting, especially young women with challenging life situations. So I'm Martha, and I'm here with Esther, and of course, Dr. Lewis. And we're looking forward today, Laura, to hearing what motivates you, what's at the heart of your ministry. And you've recently written a book called More Than One Choice, which we recommend our viewers get a hold of on Amazon. And in the book, you talk about dealing with our heart bias when we're dealing with the hurting, and also how to build bridges, not ditches. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Certainly, and it is wonderful to be back with all of you. We live in a very complex and messy world. People have very different opinions, worldviews, faith beliefs. And so what does it look like to enter this space and reflect the heart and compassion of Jesus? Sometimes that means we have to be very mindful of our own bias so that we can engage with others respectfully, that we can build a bridge of understanding, that we can ask questions and seek to understand their viewpoint. And that is very important when we're talking about some of the areas that can be quite harsh and angry, such as the issue surrounding abortion. And so that's a big part of what I've learned in my journey in this area with unexpected pregnancies, that many people have preformed opinions, ideas, strongly held beliefs, and so we need to be willing to have a conversation, to ask questions, to seek to understand, and that's how we can build bridges. And the bridges may lead somewhere or they may not lead anywhere, but I think that we need to try.
Thank you, Laura. You know, in your book, More Than One Choice, I'd like to read a little quote that you had said about your journey to come to faith. You were on a missions trip to Guatemala with other Christian physicians, and you were compelled by what you, here, let me just read it. On page 39, it says, "Love opened my heart to the truth, not fancy arguments or harsh words. It made room for me to move from one belief system to another and provided the welcoming grace I needed." Tell me a little bit about the bridges that you saw being created and formed on that missions trip.
Before I went to Guatemala on the mission trip, people had tried to talk me into Christianity, and I couldn't hear it. I couldn't receive anything. But when I went down there, when I was surrounded by love, when I witnessed love, John 13:35, they'll know you're my disciples by how you love one another. I saw that, and my heart and heart began to soften so that I could actually hear the gospel. I was open to it. It helped me to move from a place where everything went through my mind, where then I could receive it in my spirit. And I refer to that as that welcoming grace that allowed me to have faith, to move from being a scientist and New Age seeker to being a follower of Jesus Christ. And it is in those words of 1 Corinthians as well about what love looks like, that it's patient and kind and all of the attributes of love. I feel that it's so important when we live in a time when many people either have never heard the gospel, don't think there's any merit to Christianity, that if we want to be messengers of Christ's goodness, that let us lead with love. And then there'll be space and room for truth. And that was certainly my experience.
Thank you for that. That really resonates with me because I'd have to say that was my experience coming to the Lord as well. I did like to argue about the Bible, but what brought me to the Lord was someone told me they loved me, and they acted in that manner. So, in your capacity as executive director for Pregnancy Care Canada, I'm sure you have to deal with social media. So, as we're reaching out to people who may not be believers, how do we respond to them on social media? Are there some tips you can give to us so that love comes across and not just harshness?
Social media is a challenging space, but it's a space that really we have available to us. It can do a lot of good, but it can also do a lot of harm. I believe it's very important to consider what message you're communicating in a short meme. If you might say something in 6 words and believe that you're conveying a certain message, but the reader may read something else. So a big caution would be, particularly in areas where there's conflict or potentially a lot of wounding and hurt, is to consider how a message might read to someone who is broken and vulnerable. So if it's an area of unexpected pregnancy, you might want to consider, what if the reader has experienced an abortion and is suffering because of that? How do these words come across? Do they allow her to believe that there is hope in Jesus Christ?
I'm just thinking of the broken by betrayal woman, or not even just women. Men suffer rejection and brokenness too. How can we love like Jesus in other situations other than just an unplanned pregnancy? We have women in our midst often where they've had a life that has been hurtful and there's some shame attached. How can we be the hands and feet of Jesus?
I think that most of us, most people in the church, would want the church to be the place that people run to when they're hurting, when they're broken, when they feel like life's falling apart. Would it be that they would feel that the church is where they can go and to be received, to be loved, to be restored? And so it is important that we consider, how do we reflect what is available in the church, within the faith community, to people who are suffering, who've experienced maybe betrayal or their own shortcoming where they're carrying a lot of shame. And one of the parables in the Bible that I love is the prodigal son, or the welcoming father. The son made so many mistakes, treated others poorly, failed greatly. And yet when he was at his lowest moment and returned home, his father rushed out to meet him. He opened his arms, he embraced him, he celebrated with him. And we don't know how that story turned out completely, but I like to believe that that son was restored in his own heart, in his spirit. The caution in that story, though, is the elder brother who was disturbed that this one who had made so many bad choices could be celebrated. He was harsh and angry and unwelcoming. And I think that many of us, we need to be very careful that we don't become the elder brother in certain areas. And we might all have different areas where we can be tempted to hold a strong judgment, have a harsh opinion, speak words that are not welcoming and restorative. And so that is a challenge that I think we face in this current age, that may we be ones that feel safe, that are welcoming, and know how to help walk alongside people on a journey of restoration.
Thank you for that. Very wise. So I want to go back, though, to more specifically the women who are facing unplanned pregnancies. And last week you talked about how you were part of the startup of Christine's Place, a pregnancy care center here in Huntsville that Harvest supports. Tell us a little bit about the services and opportunities that women would find at Christine's Place. And also maybe if one of our viewers or listeners knows someone who's in that situation, how would they access those services?
Definitely, Harvest has been part of the establishing of Christine's Place for years. And so to anyone watching this who has been on this journey with us, thank you. We have tremendous gratitude. And now I speak more from a perspective of the national affiliation of 80 centers like Christine's Place. So in general, local pregnancy care centers provide accurate medical information about pregnancy options. They'll provide parenting support, prenatal education, material supplies, baby clothes, diapers, after birth support, and after abortion care, as well as adoption support. So many services that would be needed to help an individual or a couple in an unexpected pregnancy. And Christine's Place, definitely, if someone is looking for help, they have a website, christinesplace.org. You can access the contact information there or find out more about the specific programs and opportunities at the center here.
Your heart for helping the hurting has come through loud and clear in our conversations, and we thank you so much for taking the time to share with us. We are trusting that it will encourage our listeners to have a heart for the broken. Is there one final thought that you might want to leave with our listeners today as we wrap it up?
An observation that I've had over the years is that many people, and many women in particular, can feel like they don't necessarily have something to give, or they're not qualified or enough, or they're not articulate enough. And I want to say that that is a lie. The enemy would love to make you feel like maybe what you have isn't enough. And yet we know that God equips each person differently, that he gives gifts to each person uniquely, that the body is diverse, and that we need all people walking in their destiny and the fullness of their potential to see the change we want to see in this land. And the story that I often think of, even for myself, when I feel inadequate, is the little boy when Jesus was wanting to feed the multitudes. He had a little loaf and some fish, but he took them to the Lord and he said, "Here, take these and use them for your purposes." And then it was in the breaking of those offerings that Jesus multiplied the miracle and fed the thousands. And so don't ever discredit or discount the small thing you may feel you have in your hand. I hope that you'll see the value in yielding that and giving it to the Lord out of obedience, out of love, and trust him to do something with what you may feel is small. And in the words of Mother Teresa, she said, we can't always do great things, but we can do small things with great love. So let us be people who want to do small things with great love.
Thanks for joining us at Deeply Rooted today. If God has been speaking to you and you want to connect with someone for prayer, email us at deeplyrooted@myharvestchurch.ca. Be sure to subscribe to this channel to receive notifications when new content is released. And finally, let's stay connected with one another and deeply rooted in Christ.